with this movie, I noticed, there is a fair number of effects in it. It's actually, for a lower budget film, a pretty effects-ridden film.
We ended up with a budget for special effects, which was a couple of $1,000. And, the people that we were talking to, professional makeup people that we were talking to, were saying that they wouldn't even be able to do the zombies for less than $7,000. Well, that's just the zombies. Then we got the demon baby, and we got all the optical effects and all the other stuff that we had to figure into the budget. If we had to take $7,000 out of the budget just to make the costumes of the zombies, there would be no money for any of the other effects work. So we ended up doing it ourselves, and I guess to a certain extent it was an opportunity for me to go back to my childhood, because when I was a young man, a young boy, I used to be a tremendous fan of people like Stuart Freeborn and Dick Smith and Rick Baker, all the great makeup artists. I had a certain limited success as a child in doing my little experiments with making prosthetics and masks, but I never did anything as elaborate as what we did for Demon Resurrection. And for me, it was an opportunity to finally do what I had been trying to do all my childhood, which was to create these sort of fantasy creatures on the screen. And I think we did a pretty good job with the corpses. I think they're fairly impressive looking. I was speaking to a number of professional makeup artists, and the recommendation was that we go with standard issue zombies. Get a bunch of people muss their hair up, put some white paint on their faces and some dark rings under their eyes, and have them shamble around going And at the time I thought, well, we really don't want to do that again. We want something that's a little more fantastic. So we moved in the direction of doing the skeletal creatures that we have in the film. And I'm glad we did that, not only because I think that they look pretty nice in the movie, but also after we started shooting Demon Resurrection, there was a whole spate of zombie movies, 28 Days Later, and the remake of Dawn of the Dead, and an infinite number of other ones. And almost all of those movies had just the old type of traditional zombies. Some of them ran rather than stumbled, but they were still basically the same thing.
Can you tell me, how did you make the masks?
Well,
did you need a facility?
A very old-fashioned approach to it. We were making full head masks and basically just sculpted the skull in clay on a bust of a human head, and tried to keep it as tight as possible so the skull mask wouldn't be huge and wouldn't look ridiculous, and cast it in plaster, and then you turn that over. It's like a big bucket, and you fill it to the brim with liquid latex, and you let that stand for a little while, and the edge will develop a little thickness, the edge that's up against the plastic cast, and you pour off some of the latex, or all of the latex, let what's inside dry, and you do the process again. And after a few applications of that, you end up with a decent thickness. So you end up with basically a helmet that people can put on, has two little holes in the front so they can see, and a seam in the back so they can open it up, which is closed with Velcro. And then it's painted and accessorized with hair and leaves and mud and things like that. As far as the baby is concerned, it was very much the same process. There was quite a bit more effort put into sculpting the baby because it was difficult to really determine exactly what it should look like. With the demons, with the resurrected corpses, we had a pretty clear idea what we wanted right from the start. We wanted walking skeletons. The baby, it was, what should this look like? And
It looks a little like like the alien baby.
Yeah.
From
It did end up, I think, sort of resembling a cross between the baby from Alien, the chest burster, and the baby from Eraserhead. It's not as realistic as the baby from Eraserhead, which I think is still terrific, you know. But our baby has to do a lot more than the baby in Eraserhead did, which just had to basically lay there and cry. None of that stuff with the baby was shot with the puppet on the set. We had a stand-in that we used so that the actors could interact with it in some of the shots. But for the most part, the actors were playing to empty space. And all of the baby footage was done in front of a blue screen. The puppet was put in front of a blue screen and matted into the shot. You know, we were aware that it was going to look like a puppet, and we tried our best to make it look like a good puppet. But that's one of the problems with doing low-budget movies, of course, is that sometimes your desires in the screenwriting phase outpace what is actually accomplishable in the production phase.
So you rewrite a lot. You know, it often becomes necessary to scale down a screenplay in order to make it actually doable on a lower budget like your own.
In the original film, in the original screenplay, I should say, the baby is dragging its umbilical cord and its placenta behind it as it climbs towards Kate. There's a lot more interaction with Kate, and when Grace attacks it, she uses its umbilical cord, she wraps it around its neck and strangles it with its own umbilical cord. Well, that was way beyond anything we could have done. What we did instead was use the blanket or the sheet. She throws that over the baby right away so that we don't get to see the baby when it's being killed, and that simplified our special effects considerably. And that's another example of changes that are necessitated by location or by what we're capable of shooting that leads to an improvement in the script. Another example would be in the original script, Toth and his assistant attempt to escape at the end in their limousine, and the zombie friends caused the limousine to go off the road, and it crashes into a tree and it catches on fire, and they climb onto the limousine and hold Toth and his assistant inside the limousine while it burns. Well, of course, as soon as we, turn this over to our stunt person and to our producer, there was an agreement that it would be impossible for us to do something like that, and it was necessary for me to go back and rethink the ending. And I came up with the idea of Toth being dragged back into the pit that he had resurrected these corpses from, and that's much neater, and it's just a better ending in every respect than some sort of silly business with people crashing limousines and burning in the flames.
What?
Tell me a little bit about how much sound design and sound editing played a role in this film.
I don't think there's any question that with this movie and with probably any horror film or any science fiction film, the sound really makes the difference between the thing working and not working. The resurrected corpses, the sound that they make, that moaning sound, actually is a baby. It's a baby's cry that has been slowed down to 10% of its normal speed, and an echo effect has been added to it. Nobody ever anticipates when they're shooting a low-budget movie, particularly if you're somebody like me and it's only the second time you've done it. You really don't anticipate how much work is going to go into the sound. I would say probably half of the time that we spent in the post-production was spent on sound, not just adding sound effects, but fixing audio that had problems when we recorded it, because there's always problems on location. You can go to the end of the earth and you start shooting and there'll be a baby crying somewhere, or somebody with a jackhammer, or a lawnmower. And of course, if the story takes place somewhere where there shouldn't be any of those things, that all has to come out. And if it happens to overlap some of the dialogue, then the dialogue has to either be looped. Quality to the sound.
Okay. I love you.
Or you have to find some other take and steal the audio from that. A tremendous amount of work. We did a lot of work on the image as well, and there was a lot of correction work that had to be done on the video, and there was a lot of work that went into trying to make the video look a little more like film. But we judged the quality of the production by the quality of the sound, I think, more so than the image.
If there was anything you could have done differently, I mean...
I think we did very well making a film with this sort of size, with the number of stunts and special effects, and the size of the cast, doing it all for the amount of money we had at our disposal, and doing it well enough so that it can be a reasonably commercial project. That's quite an achievement, I think. Bottom line with all these sort of low-budget productions is that the key to success is pre-production, planning, extensive, exhaustive, everything be storyboarded, everything be budgeted, everything be properly and realistically scheduled. The more you do of that, the better the end product is going to be, and the easier it's going to be to do. If with Demon Resurrection we've come anywhere near to capturing the feel of the sort of low-budget horror films or low-budget exploitation films of the 60s and 70s, then I'd be happy. And of course the goal ultimately is to make something that's entertaining. That's the bottom line. If it's not reasonably entertaining, then we wasted our time. I think this has been an excellent experience. I think everybody who contributed, they did an enormous job, and the list of names that you see at the end of the film, every one of those people, they have my gratitude, and I hope to work with many of them again in the future if it's possible. We definitely have the desire to continue to make low-budget films for the home video market. If people think back about our films 25 years in the future, the way they look back on some of those old horror and exploitation films from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I can't think of any better legacy.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.